I made it clear in the House, and I want to make it clear again, I believe the future of Canada does not include fracking. We cannot be fracking.
So 1 week after losing a by-election to the Green Party in BC, the NDP is now stepping up its climate change policy. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh says the party would cancel not only the Trans Mountain pipeline expansion, but make more ambitious cuts to greenhouse gas emissions and end fracking. But Singh said on this very program back in January that he actually supports a very big fracking project in British Columbia, the liquefied natural gas pipeline. Check it out.
Yeah, I've already mentioned my support for this project, given the fact that they've done consultation in a very meaningful way.
So, is this a major flip-flop for the NDP leader? And what about Andrew Scheer's new promise to build an energy corridor and become energy independent by 2030? Is that realistic new plan from him as well? Let's bring in the Scrum. Tanya McCharles is a senior reporter with the Toronto Star. Joyce Napier is CTV's Ottawa bureau chief. Craig Oliver is CTV's chief political commentator. And our special guest today is the former NDP leader, current CTV political commentator, Tom Mulcair. Welcome to everyone. Tom Mulcair, your take on this. What do you make of Jagmeet Singh at one point very clearly on this show saying, I support the big $40 billion project in British Columbia for LNG. Now, I'm not into fracking anymore. Is this a fracking flip-flop?
Well, it's certainly a different position. Historically, the NDP had been very clear against fracking for all the reasons that we know. And when Mr. Singh came out in favor of that big LNG project and the attendant fracking, there were people out in BC, including Sven Robinson, who criticized him for it, saying, you know, we shouldn't be in favor of these new projects until we've got a clear path to respecting our international obligation to reduce greenhouse gases. So, of course, it's a contradiction that led a lot of people to say, look, the only voice right now on the environment that we can count on is Elizabeth May's Green Party, and that's why Elizabeth May got 39% in Nanaimo Ladysmith in that by-election just about a week and a half ago. So there's no way to get away from the fact that Canadians are worried about the environment, they're worried about climate change, and they want a strong, credible voice, consistent voice to carry them through to that goal.
And if you're the NDP leader, you are feeling the Greens breathing down your neck. And I guess he's decided that he had better come against fracking. But without fracking, there wouldn't be that pipeline which he supported here last year. And by the way, it includes thousands of jobs he would be saying no to if he makes himself clear and says, one leads to the other. There won't be the pipeline if I become the Prime Minister of Canada as the NDP leader.
There's no question this is a reflection of the political heat that Jagmeet Singh is feeling on the environment in BC, in the political landscape of BC, and Craig's right. He's really undermined some of the confidence that labourers out in BC who have jobs as a result of that
unions
plant.
aren't happy about it.
They're not at all happy. But I think more concerning for the party and for potential supporters of the party is the fact that this is something that looked like it was made up on the fly. It was something that evolved in the course of questioning in a scrum, not a thought-through policy. And so I think that speaks more to Mr. Singh's sort of readiness to confront these issues on the campaign trail.
I think maybe somebody should give him, a policy book or something, or he should do his homework, because I think people out there are going to get pretty confused pretty fast. Was this not already a done deal? And if it was a done deal and he was for it, his flip-flop now is it's indicative of where everybody is at, and perhaps the conversation on the environment should go elsewhere. If these jobs are going to be lost, why would the NDP not be for this project?
I think the reason he swung the way he did was because initially what he saw was all of the elected leaders along the route of that pipeline from all of the First Nations agreeing that they want this pipeline. And I think that's why he initially jumped on board.
Well, and it was supported by, of course, the NDP government out there. It had provincial, federal, and as you said, the elected Indigenous leaders. Let's go to Andrew Scheer. He's rolling out policies every single week. This week, lots of policies on energy. And one of the things he said, Tom Mulcair, is he'd like to build an energy corridor. That would also eventually mean that pipelines could be built both east and west, but also that Canada should be energy independent by 2030. What's your take on this energy corridor? Is it even a realistic issue, and how does it play out in vote-rich places like Quebec?
Well, that's something that always sounds good, except when you look at what's actually happening, Doug Ford said no to a deal that had been brought together between the Quebec and the Ontario Liberals under, respectively, Philippe Couillard and Kathleen Wynne. He said he doesn't need any of that clean, renewable hydro. So now Quebec is going to be selling that same hydro to New York City, which is very glad to be able to displace a lot of the oil that was being burned to heat buildings. So it's a win for New York, and I don't know why Doug Ford said no to that, but the reality is that right now, in Canada, we can talk all we want about energy corridors, but the provinces have a lot to say about that.
That's right.
Mr. Legault, who is an objective ally of Andrew Scheer, he's a very right-wing fellow with regard to the economy. He's very much in lockstep with Mr. Scheer on a lot of things, has already said yes to a massive liquid natural gas project to the Saguenay. That's something that Mr. Scheer would obviously be in favor of, but he said no to Energy East or any other new version of Energy East. So why would he pick a fight with a province that has 78 seats up for grabs in next fall's election and a government of that province that is saying everything that it can to say, look, we're on side with the Conservatives on many of these issues? I don't think that Mr. Scheer is being very well advised on some of this stuff, to be honest with you, Evan.
Well, I think that, you know, what he's trying to put out is broad strokes of a vision, and what he said on energy corridor supports his own backing of major energy projects. However, that's easier said than done. The devil's in the details. Does he intend to expropriate land? Does he intend to run roughshod over Indigenous communities that might have a say or want to have a veto over such an energy corridor? There's no details on that. So I think that this is Mr. Scheer trying to pitch his support for energy, but that's a given.
Okay. And that's true. But let's say something. You know, big projects are born out of outrageous ideas. Who would have thought hundreds of years ago, oh, look, we can have a railway from coast to coast? Everybody say, oh, you're crazy. So maybe it is a crazy idea. Maybe it isn't feasible. We don't know. I mean, we're having a hard time making a pipeline in this part of Canada. Imagine this. But imagine if actually it could work. Imagine if there was a way to make it feasible. Like, why are politicians not allowed to dream a little bit? That's what we want from them. So go for it. Let's go for big projects, and then let's kill them because we're Canadian. We love to kill our projects.
He's setting out a vision.
He's got a vision with no money, no details yet, but it's a vision.
But it's a
in
vision.
other words,
It's a vision.
this is a pie-in-the-sky pipeline.
No, it's a
That's
pipe
what it
dream
is.
and all that, but
Yeah,
maybe
it's
not.
never
Maybe
gonna happen.
not.
So what do you make of it, Craig?
Well, how else is it going to resolve the usual issues with all the First Nations, dozens and dozens of them all along the route? Is it going to be next to a highway? If it isn't next to a highway, then he's going to have to build a new Trans-Canada highway.
See, we love to do this in Canada. We love to shoot down big ideas. Why? Why do we want to just shoot it down? Why do we think it's impossible? Can't we dream a little bit?
I got a minute here. So
Yes, of
I've got
course.
a minute. So we're 5 months from a federal election. Tanya, real quick, how important will these issues of the energy and the environment, these policies that everybody's rolling out, debates on energy, climate emergencies, how much will these shape voters and the next general election?
Good God. If you listen to the Conservatives, it's going to be key, but they're pitching it as an economic argument. I still think pocketbook issues are the big ones.
Yeah. And Tom, real quick, pocketbook issues, when you talk about climate, there's the general issue, and then there's the price of gas. Look at New Brunswick, look at BC, look at Ontario. Is that going to be a key shaper of this election?
No question that the price of gas moves more votes than any concern about climate change, but there is a core voter, there's a core electorate of about 20-25% of Canadians who will change their vote to a party that they believe will act on climate change. We saw it on Vancouver Island just last week. We know that Elizabeth May's Green Party is on the march. They got 12%, for heaven's sakes, in my old riding of Outremont. Unheard of here in Quebec for the Green Party. But it shows, Evan, that there's a real concern about climate change in Canada. People are willing to change their votes based on that. Mr. Trudeau's Liberals have talked a good game. Catherine McKenna is a great spokesperson, but they just simply haven't delivered. They haven't gotten the job done. So people are looking to have a situation like the one that exists in BC, where the Greens hold the balance of power, have held the government's feet to the fire, and they've been delivering on climate change and on the environment generally.
All right. Well, we'll find out. Thanks so much. Got to leave it there. Tom Mulcair, thanks so much.